When I walked into that crowded downtown bar, I expected nothing more than a casual night with friends after a long week at work. The music pounded through the walls, colorful lights flashed across the dance floor, and people laughed without a care in the world. Then my eyes froze on something I wished I had never seen. My wife, Olivia, was wrapped tightly around my best friend, Jason. They weren't just dancing, they were kissing passionately as if they were the only two people alive. My heart stopped. What hurt even more was that they looked directly at me and continued like I didn't even exist. For several seconds, I couldn't move. Every memory of our 7-year marriage flashed through my mind. The late-night conversations, the vacations, the promises we made, all seemed meaningless now. Jason had been my closest friend since college. He had stood beside me as my best man on our wedding day. I trusted him with everything, including my family. Yet there they were, smiling between kisses while people around them laughed and cheered. Someone even whispered, "Looks like the husband finally showed up." Their mocking laughter echoed louder than the music. Olivia slowly pulled away from Jason and looked at me with absolutely no guilt. Instead, she smirked. Jason raised his drink toward me as though he were celebrating a victory. "Relax," he shouted across the room. "You were never enough for her anyway." The crowd laughed again. I felt every eye in the bar watching my reaction. Some expected me to throw a punch. Others pulled out their phones, hoping to capture another public meltdown for social media. But I remained completely silent. That silence confused everyone more than any angry outburst ever could. Without saying a single word, I walked to the bar counter and ordered a glass of water. The bartender looked at me with sympathy before quietly placing it in front of me. My hands trembled slightly, but not because I wanted revenge. I was remembering something that had happened only 3 days earlier. A private investigator I had secretly hired had delivered a thick envelope filled with photographs, financial records, and hotel receipts. At the time, I hadn't opened it. I wasn't ready to believe my marriage could really be falling apart. Now, standing in that bar, I realized the truth had been waiting for me all along. I calmly opened the envelope right there on the counter, while Olivia and Jason continued dancing behind me. Inside were dozens of photographs showing them together over the past 8 months. Luxury hotels, secret weekend trips, expensive gifts purchased using money from our joint account. But one document caught my attention more than anything else. Jason had secretly convinced Olivia to transfer ownership of several investments into a business account that only he controlled. She believed they were building a future together. Instead, Jason had been preparing to disappear with everything, leaving both of us financially devastated. A slow smile appeared on my face for the first time that night. I finally understood something neither of them realized. 3 months earlier, after noticing unusual banking activity, my lawyer had quietly moved every major family asset into a protected trust under legal review. The properties, investments, savings, and company shares Olivia believed she still owned had already been frozen pending verification. Jason thought he was stealing millions. In reality, the account he controlled contained almost nothing except carefully documented evidence of fraud. They had spent months betraying me while unknowingly walking straight into a trap built entirely by their own greed. I finished my water, stood up, and slowly walked toward the center of the dance floor. The music continued blasting as conversations suddenly became quieter. Olivia crossed her arms confidently while Jason wrapped an arm around her shoulders, expecting another emotional scene. Instead, I smiled politely and asked the DJ if I could borrow the microphone for just 60 seconds. Curious murmurs spread through the crowd as everyone turned toward the small stage. Even the bartender stopped cleaning glasses. Nobody realized that the next minute would completely destroy the perfect fantasy Olivia and Jason had been living, and neither of them had any idea that their nightmare was only beginning. The room fell completely silent as the DJ lowered the music and handed me the microphone. Every pair of eyes locked onto me. Olivia rolled her eyes dramatically, clearly expecting me to beg for another chance or make a fool of myself. Jason leaned against the bar with a smug grin, raising his glass as if he had already won. I looked around the room and smiled calmly. "I know most of you think I'm the fool tonight," I began, and honestly, I thought So, too, until I learned something very interesting about the two people standing behind me. Suddenly, the laughter disappeared, replaced by uncomfortable curiosity. I reached into my jacket and held up the thick envelope. For the last 8 months, I continued, my wife and my best friend thought they were hiding an affair. They weren't. Olivia's confident expression faded slightly. Jason folded his arms, pretending not to care. I pulled out several photographs and handed them to people standing in the front row. Within seconds, they began passing the pictures around the crowd. Gasps echoed across the room as everyone saw hotel receipts, vacation photos, and screenshots of secret messages. Olivia's face turned pale. Jason took one step forward, but I calmly raised another document before he could speak. This, I said, holding the paper high, isn't proof of cheating. It's proof of fraud. The room became so quiet that even the bartenders stopped moving. I explained how Jason had convinced Olivia to secretly transfer investment ownership into a company he claimed they would run together after our divorce. What neither of them knew was that every transfer had already been flagged by my attorney months earlier. The accounts had been frozen, every conversation documented, and every signature verified. Instead of stealing my future, they had unknowingly created a complete legal record against themselves. The confidence disappeared from Jason's face almost instantly. Jason suddenly grabbed the microphone from my hand. He's lying, he shouted. He's trying to embarrass us because he can't accept the truth. For a brief moment, a few people looked uncertain. Then I quietly nodded toward the entrance. The heavy front doors opened, and two sharply dressed investigators walked inside with my attorney behind them. The attorney calmly introduced himself and informed Jason that a formal fraud complaint had already been filed earlier that afternoon. Olivia stared at him in complete disbelief. You said everything was legal, she whispered to Jason. He couldn't even look her in the eyes. Panic spread across the room faster than the music ever had. Jason tried blaming Olivia, insisting she had signed every document willingly. Olivia immediately turned on him, screaming that every transfer had been his idea. Their perfect romance collapsed within seconds as they began accusing each other in front of everyone who had been cheering them only minutes earlier. Friends who had laughed at me slowly stepped away from the couple, embarrassed to have supported them. Phones were still recording, but now they captured Jason desperately defending himself, while Olivia realized she had been manipulated by the very man she believed she loved. I placed the microphone back on the stand and looked at Olivia one final time. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered my name. Please, let me explain. I simply shook my head. You already explained everything the moment you looked at me tonight and chose to keep kissing him. There was nothing left to discuss. I handed my wedding ring to her without anger, without shouting, and without looking back. As I walked toward the exit, the crowd silently moved aside, creating a clear path. For the first time that evening, nobody laughed. Nobody said a single word. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. The court ruled entirely in my favor after reviewing the financial evidence and documented fraud. Jason faced criminal charges related to the attempted asset transfers, while Olivia lost nearly everything she thought she had secured for her new future. The video recorded inside the bar spread online, but not for the reason anyone expected. People didn't remember the betrayal. They remembered the husband who refused to fight, refused to scream, and instead let the truth speak for itself. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't revenge at all. It's staying calm long enough to let those who betrayed you destroy themselves.